right. Here we go. So this is going to be interesting because there's going to be a lot of firsts. First for matter. So these are our fine folks representing different frameworks. Introduce yourselves, fine folks.
All right, sorry, I'm Brian Henzelmann, work at Northwestern Mutual for the past 5 months, before that for 5 years at GE. Different frameworks that I've used Angular.js, Polymer, which is the one that I'm here to represent, and then more recently been working with React. I would consider myself a full stack with the tendency to focus on front end, but that doesn't exclude me working in the back end with Spring Boot or APIs. System design, dabbled in part of UX.
Sounds good.
My name is Dan Laughlin. I work at a little startup called TriCast out in Wauwatosa. We do data analytics and compliance solutions for the Medicare and Medicaid pharmaceutical space. So it's real niche, but pretty cool. Worked at Centera before that as a consultant, where I got to work with just about every framework under the sun. Day to day, we use React in our main product and Vue and all of our backend and admin stuff because I learned it recently and thought it was the best thing ever, and that's why I'm representing it here today.
I'm Samuel Reed. I'm CTO of BitMEX.com, Bitcoin Mercantile Exchange. We do financial derivatives on Bitcoin. We've been running React since 2014, since about when it came out. Veteran of too many front-end frameworks, most of them horrible, from PXPJS and Backbone to jQuery, Spaghetti sort of frameworks, what we call frameworks. I do a little bit of everything, basically everything but design. It shows in the product.
I'm Jason Stibbs. I'm founder of Rocket. I've been running JavaScript for a long time. Similar experience to him, shipping an IE6, jQuery backbone. I also shipped a product in Node 0.10, which is in 2011. So I've got a lot of experience with Ember and React and all the different all versions of React 1 through 3. And I'll be representing Elm today. I don't think it's the best thing ever, but I don't think any of them are very good either.
I'm Graham Dion. I work at Northwestern Mutual for the last 5 months, working with React. Before that, I was at Corvisa, working with Ember for about 2 years, and then also a bit of Angular 2/4. Before that, I was at Hansen Dutch Creative for several years, doing everything from jQuery, Spaghetti code to Angular 1 to a little bit of Backbone, and I will be representing Ember today.
Hello, my name is David Pine. I'm a consultant at Centera, and I've been working with Angular.js for a long time, and then Angular 2 since the end of 2015, and now since. And I'll be representing Angular. And I share your sentiment that all JavaScript sucks.
All right, so I'm Tony Kamal. I also work at NM as an enterprise architect. I mainly do web stuff, but whatever, I'll do anything. And I build communities for fun. So, in case I didn't make it clear enough in all the emails, this is hopefully going to turn into a discussion. So after we get a question or two in, feel free to throw some.
Yeah, I was going to say, can we fight or?
Someone commented it's going to be a battle. I didn't sign up for this.
So there was some interesting conversations about defending and aggressing, and it's going to be weird. It'll be fine.
We'll all at the end.
But with that, I'd love any feedback after this. If it worked, if it didn't work, if it was helpful or whatever, but we'll talk more about that later. So the first question, because you may be listening to me talk, is what is your framework's claim to fame?
Going online?
Sure, we'll go that way again.
Sure. So Polymer, again, is what I'm here to represent. The big motto that Polymer has is use the platform. So the whole notion is let's really focus on making sure that the browsers that are rendering our applications are as close to up to snuff and the spec that we want. So web components is becoming the spec that browsers are supposed to be supporting. So rather than building on top of that, let's start to leverage web components. So Polymer gives you a way to develop reusable front-end components, similar to directives in Angular, similar to your React components. But are built in a way where they could be kind of just lifted and shipped into any of these frameworks. And it's kind of like the cousin is saying, can we all just get along because our framework can work in your framework kind of thing.
That's good. We can stay short. It's cool. We'll get through more content.
So to sum up the best parts of Vue is to say they call it a progressive web framework. And I think that describes it really well. What that means is you can adopt as little or as much of it as you like. And it works really well for everything from just like sprinkling in a little bit of reactivity on a single page. And you can go as far down the SPA rabbit hole as you want. And it'll get you a little bit more opinion the further and further you go down that rabbit hole. And I think they've balanced that really well, mixed in with a lot of just pragmatic helping things. It's not very dogmatic about the patterns you use. It's very non-judgmental about the patterns you use because it knows that you will be ashamed when you do the wrong thing. It doesn't force you into doing the right thing all the time. So it's a really nice balance, I think, of flexibility and power to do everything you need.
Sure. So React has a lot of claims to fame, basically inventing VDOM, putting an interface on top of the DOM so that if you decide to render instead to native applications like iOS and Android, even to say D3, I've seen even as crazy as Blast, which supports curses for doing terminal applications. You can do all of it in React with just JavaScript. The main innovation there being sort of completely shifting the perception of what web framework should be. Actually, I used the wrong word, it's not framework, Vue library. In that the common issue you saw with everything before it was, I have a template, I build something, and then I write a bunch of code and twiddle it every time I need to update something. Why can't that be the same code? If you could imagine a perfect Vue library where that happened, what would that look like? And they did it, and that's the main claim to fame for React, and explains the big pieces of popularity of just JavaScript.
So I'm spending today or presenting Elm. I kind of have a tricky job because Elm is a programming language as well as a framework. It's a programming language that's shipped to the framework that compiles JavaScript and runs in the browser only. It doesn't run anywhere else but the browser. So Elm is a statically typed functional programming language, which is a lot of words for saying, when it compiles, it'll run. You will not get a runtime error now. So that's its claim to fame. If you compile your app and it fully compiles to the end, if you get a runtime error, you submit a bug to the Elm compiler. You don't go try and find out if it's a Chrome issue or a Firefox issue. You just submit a bug to the Elm compiler, and when you get that runtime error, it'll print off exactly what you copy and paste into the issue. So Elm is a programming language, so it has a small learning curve. You have to learn a new language. But the core thesis of Elm is that JavaScript is too hard to write. And if you've ever shipped a JavaScript project into production and you've had 1,000 runtime errors because IE7 doesn't support, request this framework, pick your poison. There will not be a runtime error like that now. And you don't sacrifice anything for speed. It's actually in performance checks, even with the latest React virtual DOM implementation, it comes out as faster because it's fully immutable and it doesn't have to check at runtime if this reference is changed across multiple scopes.
No, I was thinking about, like you said before, like PR to the compiler. Like
An issue, yeah.
Well, okay. Well, how long does that take to turn around?
So a compiler issue is a very serious issue now. It's fixed really quickly and it's version shipped. We haven't had, so he shipped 0.16 or 18, what does it show? 18, yeah. Shows the other Elm person in the room. But he shipped it 2 years ago and they haven't done a point where it's patching the equipment. So it kind of looks a little bit like Haskell, but there's a compiler in there. Yeah, absolutely.
You said he should. What happens?
It's just one.
What happens if he gets hit by a car?
That's a very good question. It was originally done by one person during his dissertation. It's now backed by a company called No Red Ink. They're funded on it. They're funded and bootstrapped now out of Silicon Valley, and they want to be working on it. So it's just one person.
So I'm not actually sure Ember is famous enough to have a claim to fame, but the primary selling points of it are the convention over configuration. Ember is very opinionated, which is, so it has a bit of a steep learning curve, but once you get over that, it requires very little decision-making on your part to get the app to run. It just, everything runs out of the box if you follow Ember's idioms. And then also long-term stability. The team is very focused on implementing bug fixes and security fixes and performance improvements in a backwards compatible way, and having a very simple defined path for handling upgrades, including deprecations and other changes. So you should be able to take an app from 1.0 to 3.0. If you follow each step in order, you should the path should be simple and straightforward. And they also do long-term support releases. So it's kind of aimed at enterprise friendliness.
Can I add something to that? No. Please. No, Ember did something very cool that I think is a claim to fame, which is after the VDOM thing kind of caught on in all the other projects, they developed their own VDOM library, I think Polymer, and then released it and didn't break any existing apps. So it just became faster, which is such an amazing feat of engineering and design. I don't think they get
and they've done that several times. Like the people behind Ember are, I don't think Ember is for everyone. I think certainly a lot of people look at it and go, no, I'm not into it. I don't want to write my code this way. But the people behind it are very, very smart, and they've done some very impressive stuff.
And a little bit onto that, it's used a lot in enterprises like Apple, Salesforce, Roku. A lot of big companies use it. It's not as well known as React for obvious reasons, but a lot of people use it to make. If you use Apple Music or iTunes, you're using Ember every day. That's not a great LinkedIn is a great. That's also added that Roku and Salesforce use all the day.
So Angular, last but not least, guys. Their Angular's claim to fame is they're really good at versioning stuff. You can expect this to be written relatively soon.
Right now.
No, Angular, it's different. It's a lot larger and more heavy-handed. There's a lot of strong opinions. Some of the nice things are, it's kind of hard to do things the wrong way, but it's also hard to do them the right way. Does that make sense? Who's used Angular? Okay. So you know what I'm talking about. Again, at the end of the day, it's all JavaScript. But some of the cool things that I like about it personally is that they kind of impose upon you TypeScript. I'm a big advocate of TypeScript. I love the fact that you can give JavaScript types and you compile it down in TypeScript, obviously, because JavaScript doesn't know about that. I like that some of the API surface area has stuff that's like based on reactive extensions, so RxJS. So if you make an HTTP call, you can subscribe to the retrieval of that, but then you can also say, if it doesn't work, let's retry it, right? You have functional programming built into it for free. So there's a lot of really cool things about Angular specifically that I like. There's modules and components and types, and it's hard to fathom something that you can't do with Angular. Observables, yeah.
I just want to point out one thing. This has happened in the last 2 years, but everyone up here, we can all agree that everyone now writes components basically all the time, right? Polymer is all components, Vue components, React. React kind of heralded a little bit with components, Ember's components, Elm's components. Now Angular, in Angular 6, right? It's components.
Right. Funny you bring that up, because we probably won't be up here next time around, because it'll be WebAssembly, right?
Sure.
So can you explain what happened to you with React?
Can I explain what happened?
Is it like an
No, it's Angular 5 now. I don't think there's a set
They skipped 3 to go to 4 so they could have all their components on the same version. Because the router got rewritten multiple times.
Yeah, because they're good at versioning stuff. I said that.
So they,
I'm just saying they call them components and not another word.
Right.
Just make something up.
This thing.
Seems like there's a convergence too on like how you should build these. Because like Polymer, the big thing that people complain about was that you use HTML imports instead of modules. It's very HTML focused, but with Polymer 3, is when they're looking at not having to use HTML imports.
And it's funny watching it come around the other way, which Polymer's big innovation, as far as I remember, aside from it just being standards compliant and all that sort of stuff, is that this idea of building a component and you're building the template and the styles and the functionality all in one file, which kind of came all the way around in React as style components once we all got sick of SAS.
You know that, right? With single page component.
Yeah, you have a single file with your JavaScript, your HTML snippet, your CSS snippet. If it's a scope, or this is going to only talk to the global sheet.
The thing about that is that I like that you can still write SAS in that file.
Yeah.
So I can rip through and do a whole crap ton of loops or whatever I need to do.
Yeah, each segment of that file, you know, your code behind basically your template and your styles are, you can interchange the language used for any of those. So if you want to write your view model in TypeScript, you can do that. If you want to write the HTML in probably a Java plugin. Yeah.
It's Pug now.
So there's a whole lot of, like, when you introduce new developers saying, well, this seemed like a good idea at the time.
Exactly. Yeah, you can have yourself as much code as you like.
Good.
Which is a pro and con.
Now, one of the nice things about Ember is exactly the opposite. You're doing it this way. Yahoo Katz and Tom Dale have solved all of your programmer arguments. You may not agree with their solutions, but you're doing it there. It's actually very very helpful for working with teams. If someone knows how to do it the Ember way, they know how to work on your project. There's not a lot of explaining your preference for this pattern or that pattern, because you're doing it the way they told you to.
It's good. It's like Golang. It's like, it's ugly, but you've seen it before.
Yeah.
Fast, right? We should have all written an app in our framework of choice, the same thing.
Oh, yeah, like this was another one more?
That's my thing though, they would just kind of look the same. I mean,
Actually,
the only thing is he would write JSX, he would write an HTML file, he'd have an HTML file.
Actually, you can just point you to whatever to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Actually, I do have an app for that, because I think the to-do list thing is totally broken. It's too simple, it doesn't show
Real
the
world.
about it.
There's a new example called Real World App,
All right.
which is a real world app with login and lists of things,
Yeah.
posting things and liking things. There's all kinds. There's one for Elm, Ember. There's one for everyone here and not here. So, but yeah, I think the big thing is when React first came out, they showed us this idea of components, and at the time, everyone did everything differently. Angular had a lot of different things they did. Ember had controllers and all kinds of good stuff.
I really like the 4,000 line Angular views. Those were amazing.
Yeah. But now we've all converted it. What I'm trying to say is our arguments up here are going to be very small and on the edges. Like, oh, I can use less or whatever. It's going to be we're all very similar these days, I think. It's kind of tough to argue about it. It's like,
It would have been different 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm sitting up here like, you guys are still doing string templates, what the hell's wrong with you? And we'd have a whole thing about that. Somebody would say something about putting HTML tags in your JavaScript. There must be something wrong with you doing that.
So,
but now I think we all agree.
Yeah.
so with these similarities, is there something on your frameworks that it's terrible at?
There's a paralysis, I think, with React and with a lot of frameworks now. I mean, even just the fact that there's, 6 of us up here. There's a lot of choice in framework, and then even when you get to it, and excuse me, it's a view library. With React, you have to choose. You have to choose state management, and you have to choose kind of everything that goes with it. Are you going to use styles components? Are you going to use SAS? Are you going to use roll up now, and a couple others. It's super hard to get with that whole sort of thing, because you kind of have to just choose a path and go down it. And it's nice to see, things like Great React App, and I'm sure there's corollaries in every major framework or view library at this point. Such that you can get started with that, because otherwise, I mean, I experienced this, you know, we put an application in React in production in late 2014, and it's just like, just kind of choose something and go. You know, there's 12, at that time there were 12 Flux libraries and no Redux libraries that didn't exist at the time. And they're all kind of the same. And in the end, you just go. You know, you can't sit there and wait.
I think that's kind of where if there's a divide, it's probably like right here, because like Elm is very opinionated on how, you know, you don't use Warp, you use Elm compiler and it does everything. Ember you use.
Ember use Ember CLI. Ember is all of the tools that you need out of the box. Ember's terrible at being small. That's
You don't get to make choices, and then I think Angular's going that route now too as well. They have their own CLI.
Yeah. Well, that helps out with a lot of various things. Like I've been writing a lot of it by hand. So with Angular, some of my least favorite things of it might be partially my fault for imposing the team to use it when it was an alpha, right? So we've been following it for so long now. But it's just been, you know, if we hit the brakes at all and not keep up with the latest build, you know, the latest version of it, it's a major pickup when we do decide to take the latest version. So when we held off on taking 3, and then we waited all the way to 4 or something. So we went from 2 to 4 something, and that was like an entire week of just trying to get everything aligned again. And there was.
Is that going to make a lot of decisions for you, or is it?
Well, no, they changed, they moved your cheese. So,
They added something in 4.2 that wasn't a component, it was a thing that was above a component.
the module?
Yeah.
Yeah, so everything went to modules, right? And then the router got rewritten, and then latest 5 was that HTTP client got moved and then altered, and so it's just been, yeah, I mean, they're very opinionated, right? So the Angular team will make a lot of things that they impose upon you, and it's not always easy. So we've been trying to abstract away wrappers around certain things, so we have our own like wrapper around the HTTP service so that we can have our defined interface and consume it however we see fit. So it's only one point of change when we go to the next version and stuff. So.
I want to bring up that's something that's really important to think of when you're choosing which technologies to go with. It's just kind of gauge how serious is the development team behind this, and what are their goals and what do they hold to be important. Actually, Carrie, you and I were talking about this earlier. Like, why should you never use MongoDB, and whether or not like that project has gotten better. Sorry, I gotta go, but talk about Mongo.
He's a new library anyways.
Mongo has a component now? No. I thought there was just a minute, doesn't matter.
That is a fair point to bring up, because Vue right now, so there's one guy who wrote the whole thing, right? His name's Evan Yu. And right now he has a Patreon page where you can contribute to support the development of Vue. Like, he's still the core developer, he writes the main thing. He's got a whole team of people working on sort of the extra libraries and other pieces that work into the ecosystem. But at the center of it is the one guy. He has plenty of money on Patreon. That's one plus. You can see exactly how much he's making and see that he's well supported right now. But on the flip side, he's not backed by a major company, which might be a good thing, might be a bad thing, depending on your view of all that.
No pun intended.
Yeah.
Polymer has a story you were building, or
For building, like compiling?
like Webpack, or does it make decisions for you, or do you have to make a lot of decisions?
So it doesn't necessarily make decisions for you in that regard. I often saw using Gulp as a task runner. I've seen some videos now of people using Webpack with it. But you have module dependency with HTML imports versus modules. That's a struggle. Another big one that you'll see is that you still have to use a lot of polyfills with the older browsers. Since it doesn't transpile into native JavaScript, it assumes that you can use web components. Modern browsers, that's not a problem, but if you are supporting, like at an enterprise, or these computers still have old IE8 kind of thing. Even that,
Which is still broken.
yeah.
Just a show of hands real quick, I'm curious for everyone here in the crowd. So people rose their hands for Angular. What about like Polymer? Who's used Polymer?
Are you saying anything?
One guy. Too embarrassed to raise his hand. What about Alan? Ember? Okay.
Vue and React.
Wait. Now do Angular again?
Okay, so wait, hold on. Let's be more specific. Angular 2. All right, here we go.
Angular 3. No.
Hang on, wait,
Who just does straight up Java?
Yeah.
Oh, look at these.
Yeah, we should have one guy represent no framework.
Where's Knockout? Where's Knockout?
Okay, who's written in the Magento?
Now let's wait, let's play one more.
These are the old ones.
How many of you have done a jQuery?
What about Backbone? Backbone, anyone remember that? 3 of us? Yeah.
How many are still using jQuery?
Are you considering moving off of it? Is that why you came here tonight, to make a decision? Yeah.
Well, it's for binding versus.
Yeah, good.
So I'm
You got
curious.
questions?
Yeah, please.
So they first through my seed questions.
I'm curious.
Well, this guy.
So I'm curious. I personally like Angular, not AngularJS, the not version 1.
Thank you, sir.
So wait, just to clear, Angular is the new one,
Yeah.
AngularJS is the crappy old one.
Exactly. So I personally.
Google's really good at names.
I know. So one of the hardest parts about developing in Angular is trying to Google anything. But regardless, though, I really like it because of the convention over configuration as well, because it basically says that these are the standards. You have a component, you have a module. These are basically, you have the command line interface, and it writes something for you. Something like, I haven't really gotten too much into React or Vue, but as you guys said, you hang your own rope. I'm curious, when you take into account the balance between that, how easy is each of your frameworks for being able to plug it into an application without making it feel like it is an external component that's deployed separately?
So with
Kind of like
Angular,
jQuery, by the way.
with Angular, it's all or nothing. You're not going to be able to like piecemeal it into an existing application. So if you're looking to write something, I would suggest like an enterprise application, for example, something that's larger scale where you have lots of moving pieces. That's where its strengths lie. Angular.io has a great story around documentation. And it's kind of funny because like 6 months ago they had a drop down and you would go look at the examples and it was like, look at this example in TypeScript. Well, maybe I want to look at it in just, JavaScript, right? So you click on that and it's like, wait, no one's actually done this. And they've since removed it. So it's kind of crazy that there's a JavaScript framework that doesn't have documentation in JavaScript.
Ember is kind of the same. I mean, it's monolithic. You wouldn't want to try to embed an Ember application into a larger context. You could try it, but I wouldn't.
I'll answer for Elm and React. If you also React, you can do React. Cool. I've shipped a lot of React, so I think you can do whatever. But Elm is designed to be self-contained. If you want to insert into one component, you can do it. Elm, right? What are you laughing at? Sorry.
Or scissors.
Sure. But yeah, with Elm, I know a lot of people, the main users of it will use it as just one component of their larger web app. They ship like a standard WordPress website or something, and then they have this Elm app that lives inside of it. You can just say run on this element, and then it owns that element, and it's fine. And the runtime is actually compiles down pretty small. I've done large apps, that compile down to total runtime JavaScript 30 kilobytes. So it's very easy to integrate into an existing app, or you can have it take over the whole page and do your whole app. But at the moment, the best way to use it is to use the embedded context. With React, it's also designed to run in an embedded web context.
Some of the early training that I got for how to adapt to React was very much just find the lowest level component on your page that you can touch and rewrite, and then put React there, and then put it in the next spot, and then put it in the next spot, and eventually you can take over the whole system.
Can I add to that? Actually, with portals too, it's really awesome. You can actually just have one app and you can continually spider your arms out into different components out there. And
Portals being a feature that just shipped in 16 feet a month ago.
Yeah, sorry, I read it. So, and I'm doing it with like a Magento. So I'm taking pieces that are already out there in this folder and just injecting little bits of React components inside of them. So they all have one main core, like the Elm.
As far as Vue goes, it was actually designed with this case in mind, so I guess I win. With the asterisks of if you don't care about IE as much and if you're willing to put up some pain, You can use Vue without a build step. You don't need Babel, you don't need Webpack, you don't need any of that stuff. It'll hurt, right? Like, this is not how it's designed to be used, but you can be productive. So if you have an old jQuery app, you can put Vue in there, start to wire up your Vue model in places here and there. Very similar to a strategy with React. You pick a component, build that one out. React doesn't play as well with others. It likes to be in, if you start to mix and match, it gets weird. But Vue is a little more okay with that. If you're not doing a single page app, you just have, I want this, and I want Vue, and I want it to not have jQuery writing directly to my DOM anymore. I'm going to have a separate object that binds them together. You can do that piecemeal very well. The asterisk with IE, like if you don't have string template literals, the ES6 feature, you're going to hate your life because you're writing all your templates in strings. And you don't have arrow functions, which are just nice for a lot of things. So those are the asterisks, but Vue is designed to be introduced progressively to an application like that.
Polymer is similar because it's actually designed with a shadow DOM, which is similar to the virtual DOM in React. But it's more immutable in that, like, you can't have a global CSS style sheet and then influence your component. Won't work. So you take the component, you see how it is in the documentation, you implement the HTML version of that component. That's what it is. That's all you get. You can configure it if they expose different variables or attributes. So if you're looking at functionality on the HTML attribute, or if you're looking at manipulating the style, you can do that with variables that are accessed either through CSS or SAS or that style related, which is good and bad. So it's good because you don't have to worry about it. It will work. It's bad because you can't manipulate it as much if you want to. I started with AngularJS and then started finding these really nice, very functional web components from Polymer, and we started injecting them into an AngularJS project. It's absolutely fine. I've tried it with React. Didn't really need to continue that. I just want to make sure it worked. It worked. I've also done complete single-page applications on its own. You can also develop Polymer applications without touching JavaScript, because they're all web components. You can trigger AJAX calls or hire AJAX, or HTTP, choose your verb, fire it, do some data binding, and then use it somewhere else, and just use complete components.
Polymer's kind of neat because it's designed so, like, when you use a select box in Chrome, it's a web component. Or you can use input, type date, and it shows what the date taker. That's a web component. Polymer's designed to write components like that, at that level of abstraction. It's kind of neat.
Here's a data table. I have an array of objects. Cool, it will display in pagination and lets you sort filter. And you didn't have to write anything.
One kind of cool thing I've seen with that is there's more of a propensity in Polymer for people to put even wackier stuff in the components. We did one a while ago where we put web workers as tags and then passed them data and had them produce output. And you can do pools as tags. And I don't see too much of it in React. Technically, you could do it, but it works really well in Polymer, and just feel like, anything you want, you can put it in a tag. Really cool.
Right there.
Follow-up?
Yeah, can I just have a follow-up? Just a follow-up to the question, specifically because of what you were mentioning. How much rope do you hold yourself? I guess kind of like.
How much rope is hanging around your neck?
You hold your own rope essentially. How much?
I think it's the gun pointed at your foot.
I'd say there's a lot of rope, but you can walk around pretty freely.
There's a lot of prayer, but if you look where you're going.
I think when he was making that metaphor earlier, he was specifically talking in React. There's a big problem with people making micro libraries. And you may have heard of LeftPad. It's a JavaScript library that adds a string to the left. It does one function call, but it's in that JavaScript package. When you run a React app, you have to make decisions. You don't have to make any decisions about how you're going to render your view or how you're going to manage the state of that view. But if you want to do anything else, you need to make a lot of decisions on your own about how am I going to build it? How am I going to manage state? How am I going to am I going to do CSS in JavaScript? Am I going to do CSS in SAS? Am I going to do CSS in you name it? There's a lot of decisions you have to make, and if you make the wrong one, you're a little bit stuck with it until the time to change it.
Wasn't it left hand that brought down the entire web?
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah, that actually happened in Milwaukee.js. I got 80 of his packages. Eventually NPM took them. But people were squatting on them. Because basically, at that time, you could go ahead and register the same package, put some, like, post-install malware on there, and run anything you want as a user. Yeah, this is
What
why...
happened was, there's a student who made a bunch of these micro libraries, and at the time in NPM, you could delete all of your packages. They would disappear. So everyone's build systems would fail, and you could go to NPM and say, oh, left pad's available, I'm taking it, and then put, now you can put your Bitcoin miner in it, and it would be deployed across the web, because everyone's build would just automatically succeed. It was a huge problem at the time.
It's a huge problem, and at that time too, NPM didn't have a mechanism for locking down dependencies by hash.
Yep.
So even your production machines, depending on how you did it, would get whatever, and suddenly your private keys are transmitted to some.
It happened a couple times.
Yeah.
So what was your question?
I was actually kind of thinking towards what you were saying, so I know you were saying how Ember doesn't really work well if you try to integrate with something else that's really density on its own. But I also remember you were saying that Ember isn't necessarily for everyone. There's a certain way that applying it. Do you want to elaborate on it?
Well, Ember is very opinionated. Your app has to be, your app is going to use a certain structure with very little variation. And it is, it's ultimately it's component based like all these other frameworks. So you're all value components that you're putting in your putting layers of components into your Ember application. But Ember comes with its own Ember data, which is its data store, which comes out of the box. You can swap it out for other options, but it's very much, you get everything out of the box that you need to run your application. And it's got a getter setter pattern that it uses you might be accessing just like a regular JavaScript property, but it also has a concept of computed properties that are, the property is actually a function that returns some value based on the rest of your application state. You have to, there's the way that it uses promises and things is very specific, and you won't get very far if you're not following Ember's patterns. Yeah, so one of the nice things about Ember as opposed to React, where you have to make all these decisions yourself, and you're stuck with them if you make choices that you later regret, or Angular, where it will let you get. Angular's opinionated, but you can get a little further going against those opinions before you figure out that you've gone the wrong way. With Ember, if you don't follow Ember's patterns and Ember's conventions, you will not get very far before before your app stops working with them. Ember just says, I don't like the way you're doing this.
For example, it ships with, you have to use handlebars for templates. It's got an Ember router you have to use. It's got Ember data, like you said. It's got a pattern of controllers still, but now with more components and views tied together. If you try to, prior to the latest version, it used to use shitty JavaScript bundler. Bower and you So now you can use NPM, which is cool.
Yeah, as of 3.0, which is very recent, they got rid of the Bower dependency.
It says right on the Power site, right? You should use it.
To Ember's credit too, why did we make this?
Yeah.
To Ember's credit, like when they make these decisions, they have a proposal process. So you submit a proposal, I want to change this about Ember, and then people have a chance. You're using it, anyone can just go in and say, I hate this, right? Or this is my reason argument why it's good or bad.
There's a very active community around it. So it's all the process of updating it is very thoughtful. They take a lot of time to consider the implementation of new features and their implications for backwards compatibility and things like that. So the decisions that Ember makes, they might not be your preferred decision, but they're not wrong. There's very few. Yeah, there's very few assumptions that Ember makes where you go, this is just objectively a bad decision, because there's very smart people who go through a very deliberate process to plan out the implementation of future features. So there's a bigger learning curve. to get into the mindset of Ember's patterns. And you might not like all of those patterns, but the result is an app that is very stable and very maintainable, and very easy to transition from one app to another. You can jump from one Ember team to another Ember team that's working in a completely different application, and you immediately know how their application works because it works the Ember way. But again, if you start doing things wrong, you will not get very far. It just won't work very well.
Try to use node modules in Ember 2, and it's
There's so much value in the well-tread path, and that you have all these applications and all these developers working on that same kind of line of reasoning and that same code base. I see so much value in that. Like, once your app is really special, or you're trying to do something insane, or you want total functional purity and time travel debugging and writing defined render targets, you don't need any of that kind of stuff, and you just need a stable app, which is probably 90% of what people are writing. It's an option you should seriously consider.
And you can do wild stuff with Ember if you get into it. I wouldn't I wouldn't immediately jump past from the to-do list to doing this, but one thing that we implemented at Corvisa was a section of our app was a full page canvas, canvas application using Fabric.js that then interacted back with the state of our Ember application and communicated both ways in there. And that took a lot of work to get that working, but you can do some pretty cool, wild stuff if you want to, and if you really get into an understanding of how Ember works, it's very, very powerful.
Does that work on?
Yeah.
All right, so
Actually, the latest version just made support for 8, 9, and 10.
what about Ember?
So I kind of have a question for the whole panel. Basically, based off your framework, whether it pairs really nicely with a specific build tool, and then if there's also sort of a back end that kind of goes really nicely, like Angular, for example, Node.js probably do pretty well with it, and then it already has Webpack shipped with it.
Sure. That's a great point and a great question, actually, because I'm not using either of those. I'm using ASP.NET Core for my back end, and since we were early adopters, we started with System.js. So,
They're super early.
yeah. And we're still with it now.
Ember works with any backend. Ember data is very configurable. You basically write a serializer and deserializer that communicates with your API. And there's a lot for various popular backends like Firebase, etc. You can find pre-made Ember data serializers that you can plug in and just interact with out of the box. But if you have a standard REST interface, you can interact with just about anything. If you have non-standard interface, you can configure Ember data to talk to it.
For Elm, it's agnostic way using the back end. I know a lot of people who write Elm end up using Phoenix for the back end, Elixir and Phoenix, because if you're writing functional programming in the front end, you don't really want to give all that up and not do it in the back end as well. So that's the thing that people do. But people use .NET, PHP, whatever works for you. In terms of build tools, it comes with its own compiler, which you can use. There's a lot of examples of compiling with Parcel, with Webpack, with Gulp, with Brunch, with what's that other one? Brunch.
I guess what would be a preferred one? Elm would make sense like Elixir, because I believe that I've heard that those two are commonly associated.
A little bit, but people will use Webpack a lot because it's the most popular one. I use all 3 of them now, and it really doesn't matter. It comes with an npm module you can import, and you just do elm compiler.compile piece strings basically. So however, whatever tool you want to use, Webpack or whatever. People end up using Webpack as the hot one right now, kind of on the way out, I guess. But
Wait, what? No.
it peaked. We're on the downtrend. There's new ones coming out.
Shots fired.
I mean, Rollus is pretty cool.
Except Webpack doesn't have.
Kind of.
No, not kind of, buddy.
Fight about the framework. Fight
Vue does have, they have a tool called POI, P-O-I, which is a zero configuration out of the box, convention-based, we will build you a Vue app. It still uses Webpack and all that stuff under the hood. It's a lot like creating a React app, where it's just kind of, here's your off-the-shelf, don't worry about it, follow the conventions. But again, you can go as far down the rabbit hole as you want. I have it on an ASP.NET Core backend as well. We're using Webpack for our builds right now, just because POI came out after we built some of these. And it's the same kind of pluggable thing as the other frameworks. So the Laravel community actually in the PHP world has adopted Vue as kind of their main go-to front-end library, which is cool. The PHP people deserve nice things too. The Laravel community has some build tools that go along with that. Laravel Mix, I think it's called, is there's a lot of Laravel something else, but one of those is a similar kind of zero configuration tool.
For Polymer, it really doesn't matter as long as you can open it in the browser. Doesn't mean I can serve it out at work. So you don't need a build tool, but you probably want one to unify, actually bundle your code. So pick what you want. From that regard, it should work. But what most commonly is used, from what I've seen, is Delta and attachment.
Yeah, with all of them, you're probably going to prefer a Node backend, just so you can share code, just kind of across the board. That's really common. Yeah, except that one.
Unless you're not that guy, so probably not.
Yeah, but Node is extremely popular. For instance, we share a bunch of validators and parts of our data models and all that across projects, and it's really nice to be able to do. Even just to share from the front end to the front end server, much less between the front end and the API server further down the stack. You can share test frameworks, that kind of thing. React in particular mates pretty well because Jest is so good and it integrates so well with React, and because of server-side rendering, which is kind of still not really good enough to use for anything other than SEO, but it's there and you can use it. Other common thing you see in React land is people going whole hog in GraphQL. I haven't done it myself, but you've got Relay, you've got other kind of wacky libraries like Netflix or Spalfor. Really interesting stuff, kind of speaks to the Facebook background. I want to add on to your comment about Webpack, and I'm not going to get right into it, but I will say that when it comes to open source development, much like politics, follow the money. It really is important actually, because libraries that are developed by a couple of passionate guys occasionally, well, often fizzle out. They get tired. It's so hard being active in open source and responding to every issue and every pull request. It's so nice if you have something that has corporate backing, whether that's, the original developers get a bunch of money from the corporation and finally they can take it on full time, or you've got a behemoth like Facebook that just says, we're using it in production. And to bring it around to Webpack, I would say that Rollup, for instance, was posing a significant challenge to it, and that you might see a shift in what the popular bundler was until a bunch of people put a ton of money down to give Tobias Coppers, the author of Webpack, only $150,000 a year just to make Webpack. And suddenly it's making huge progress day by day. Actually probably the most egregiously underfunded project right now is Babel, which everybody thinks is Facebook. It's not. It's actually like 3 guys, one of them out of Adobe, Behance, just volunteering their time, and almost nobody gives anything to it. Fortunately, it's so fundamental to everything, it's not going to die.
I think that to jump on that a little bit, just because a project has corporate backing doesn't automatically make it good. I think a good example of that is AngularJS. AngularJS was very popular because it was Google AngularJS. It wasn't just, if it was just 3 guys put on AngularJS, which realistically it wasn't like Google was using this across the product. It was one team in Google using AngularJS, and they decided to release this. It wouldn't have been as popular, right? So I think you got to be careful looking at the money, because I think a lot of times companies will put money at what they need, not necessarily what's the best solution or what
It's not
isn't that good for a community.
Well, maybe there's a better kind of corollary, like what are people using in production?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, you have to look at your scenarios. If you're an enterprise and you need to put something really stable and you don't want to fuck around with it too much and you want to make sure that it's going to be available for 10 years, that's obviously a requirement you definitely have to look at. If you're learning something on the side or you're trying to improve yourself as a developer or change how you see the world as a developer, definitely don't use the money as your main metric.
So a good example of this conversation is, for whatever reason, the conversation for what's used as your state storing Redux comes up a lot at NM between Redux and MobX. And the conversation always ends the same way of like, MobX has these cool features, but it's being used by a fraction of the people that are using Redux. So there's an ecosystem already built around Redux we can leverage. There's a community already around it that we can leverage. Until like something matches that, there's not the ROI of like switching and the risk of switching is not yet. Now maybe you have a very specific use case or you're a small team or experimenting, like there's other reasons to try it, but from like a corporate stability standpoint, we have to bet on what's going to be around and useful.
And then something else too, as a higher level thing, as developers, we very rarely make rational decisions. Usually we just make decisions based on
Shiny.
we make decisions on what's popular. Facebook's doing this, oh my god, it's so cool, I have to use this on my startup. And then all of a sudden 10 million people are using it, and a lot of them can't tell you why they would use it in production other than Facebook uses it and it's fast and it's a VDOM. They'll just, well, that's what humans do, we're herds. We're tribe-minded, we want to do what all of our friends are doing. So I think it's careful that, when you're making decisions, to make sure that you're making them for the right reasons. You're not just making them to follow the coolest thing or the next thing. Maybe Ember will work better in your organization, or maybe, Webpack will work better than Rollup or something. To try to be cognizant of the fact that we all make decisions based on ideological reasons instead of, rational, this is why we're doing it. If you have a 1,000-line jQuery app that really works and your customers are loving it, maybe don't rewrite it. It's going to suck. Or not 1,000, 10,000 line, I should say. It's going to suck to rewrite it. It's going to be painful.
There was a question back here.
I just wanted to ask about what each of these frameworks relationship is like kind of like job prospects, and also do they have certain associations? Like you said, Ember is kind of more of a corporate, corporations are bringing this on as opposed to maybe other things. I just wondered if there was, like, would you recommend, like learning Ember? Is that why you're representing it, or?
Yeah. For me, Angular is enterprise. I wouldn't take the time to set up all this. Again, Angular is pretty heavy-handed. There's a lot of boilerplate. There's a lot of various semantics about how the folder structure is, and there's a lot of different things to it that are kind of, it's a little much. So depending on your needs, like if you're trying to spin up a simple web app, Angular is probably not the right choice.
Good job prospects though.
Hands around the room.
That's the first question, right? What are the job prospects? Like, what would you learn to get a job? What kind of job would that get you?
Yeah.
Milwaukee area in general, if that would be helpful.
Sure, yeah, you do that.
Sure, so the Milwaukee area in general, and they can debate me if you want, but React and Angular are probably your top two. Well, jQuery is probably still winning, but React and Angular are probably your top two, with React seeming to be the more popular for job prospects right now in the area. So like I work at NM, majority of the stuff that we write now is in React. We work Backbone, there is some Angular, but the majority of it is React.
I'm seeing a lot of like actual like just Node developers though, like more right like flat.
Much of our API layer is Node now.
So it's not. I mean, it's kind of.
And then everything else is, there's jobs around, but there's not as many.
I wouldn't recommend trying to become an Ember expert and then looking for jobs. I mean, I would do what you do now and get used to it. But, unless you want a job that's asking for Ember experience, I wouldn't become an expert like just to look for jobs. I don't think there's enough out there to justify it.
And the Elm folk are trying really hard to make a takeoff here.
Raise your hand again, the one guy that did.
There's three of us. Yeah, so we'll work there too. Well, okay, so I don't think you're not going to get a job in Milwaukee now unless you create it. So if you want to work at a startup or something, you can probably make a pretty strong case for Elm. If you work at a small company, you make a strong case for Elm. The reason why I would suggest you learn Elm, if you learn something like Elm, it's a signal to develop to hiring managers and people, even here, but all over the country, that you're on your own looking for things to learn, going out, exploring, new ways of doing things, and it's something that excites you. And that's, for a lot of hiring managers, that's a very good property. There's also, I don't think you should limit yourself to the Milwaukee area. All this stuff that we're talking about happens on the internet. Everything that we talked about happens on the internet. Very little that happens in one-on-one personal conversations, except for maybe at Facebook. So look for remote jobs, right? If you want to learn, if Ember really gets you jazzed up, learn Ember and look for remote jobs. There's tons of them. And Elm, there's jobs as well. There's like 3 companies maybe in the world that are hiring for it, but it's new, to be fair. I mean, you have to be really good at Elm and you have to be excited about it to get the job at Elm. I'm not going to split hairs,
Yeah.
but that's the way the world works.
You're asking like what to learn to become employable, like just become really good at JavaScript.
Yeah.
Or anything.
Or
whatever
whatever
it
it
is
is
you
you
want
want to do, and be less concerned about like the
Yeah, pick any one of these and just be like, I love this, I'm gonna do something cool, and just show the excitement.
Well, that makes sense a lot more. That's,
Oh, it's a huge waste of time.
Go with you next, but
Yeah, well, actually, I wanted you guys to go, because I'm actually especially interested in Polymer response. And you,
Yeah, me
actually.
too.
Yeah, I agree. We were just saying earlier that these frameworks are so similar to each other nowadays. The concepts translate so well. If you're looking for a job in China, Vue is actually taking off in China. So there's that. Other than that, unless I'm looking at a job listing for a company that I know is dug in on products, when I see someone's looking for an Angular or a Node developer, I just read that as JavaScript developer. Because they're going to have side projects that aren't Angular. They're going to have side projects that aren't Node. They just heard that and think that that's what they need, or you're actually in charge of this one-man team. And so don't worry too much if you don't know Angular and you're applying for an Angular job. Because if you know a lot about a JavaScript framework, you can pick it up in a week.
100%. Yeah.
Polymer, there's not a big presence in Milwaukee, it's more California. GE is fully bought into Polymer. So they have an entire Predix-UI.com site, tons of reusable components that you could just
They started using healthcare as that G corporate.
GE Digital owns it, and all of GE, all tier 1 businesses are using it. They're kind of mandated since it's their whole platform that they're doing for industrial IoT. So that's the big one in here.
you want to talk about React? Or are you good?
Sure, why not? Why not? Well, NM is hiring, I know that. For React, we're hiring, we've got probably 6 open positions on React.
Remote developers as well.
Yeah, we do Chicago, Milwaukee, San Francisco, New York, Hong Kong. Actually, can I do something unconventional?
No.
Please?
No crew.
No, I
You
mean,
represent React, so.
I really want to ask Aaron, what proportion do you see framework to framework?
Aaron's the resident recruiter, everyone. Stand up.
I agree with Tony on this. A ton of needs. Well, one, you need to know JavaScript, but then when it gets down to like you're working with HR folks who don't know the ins and outs of the JavaScript framework, they really want to know like what have you done, and the more ways a recruiter or a hiring manager can see that work through a GitHub. So if you want to get a job in Milwaukee, you're going to want to learn React or Angular. Like those are the 2 biggest ones, hands down. Now, if you haven't done anything with React or Angular in a professional setting, you have to have something on your GitHub, or you have to have some portfolio link in order for someone to help push you through that process. Because if they see in your last job all you've done is Angular, unfortunately, that with a lot of companies in Milwaukee takes precedence over anything else. So,
I want to add one line to the end of that. Probably try to avoid those companies if you want to learn something. Usually they just want to put you, in that case, they want to put you asking to see if you get to work. But they don't want to teach you. So just be careful. If you try to look for organizations that are willing to, like he said, take your JavaScript for what it is, valuable experience, JavaScript experience, valuable experience, in my opinion.
there's also layers you have to work through to get to that person that does care about it.
Yes.
That's why you come to me up to this.
Yes, you.
Okay, I'd like to ask you guys about how you guys start thinking about abstracting your own business from the framework. Like, where does your business start and end, and where does the framework starts and end? Like, is it like a very big commitment to use the framework as like a marriage, for example, or are we flexible to change the framework, for example, if the needs arise? For example, the Angular changing words is a little bit scary for me, and do you guys abstract your business in a way that switching from one framework to another can be even possible?
There's a certain style of development that I like to stick to. That's really important, is that you build your API first, and you build your view layer on top of it, but consider your view layer to be one of just many possible clients to your API. And that's pragmatism in terms of, you're probably going to rewrite your front end at one point. You're almost certainly going to do a mobile app at some point. We're going to be doing WeChat apps, which I know nothing about, but the whole, yeah, really, people want to trade through WeChat.
It's huge. How to run that.
Yeah, it's great. But the point being, like, you have to be prepared for that, and you have to build for that first. And if you do, then switching out is really not a big deal. It helps if it's lightweight, like React is, and not that opinionated. You might be able to switch out component by component. I know people going the other way around. Like it's pretty popular for a long time to switch out backbone views piece by piece with React. If you have a clear enough separation and you're not, say, putting SQL statements in your templates like PHP, it's not going to be too bad.
Yeah, I think what he's trying to say is we try to have an architecture that keeps them separate. Like have a module that owns your business logic as best you can. I mean, obviously, just last week I wrote a React component that had everything kind of coupled, but it was, for that project, it made sense. If you're running like a large business app with a lot of business logic, try to keep it separate. I mean, Elm's a bad example of it. If you want to write, a lot of your logic in Elm, you should stay in Elm. It gives you a lot of benefits to do it in Elm because it has a type system that can verify that you're doing the correct, you're modifying your data and mutating your data and working with your data and your logic correctly, and it can tell you when you're not at compile time, so before you ship it to your users. But yeah, try to think of your apps architecturally and have it separate. Always try to keep your view a little bit separate from as much business logic as you can.
Is the way that I think of it is pick whatever lets you be productive quickly.
Yeah.
Because there are challenges and there's noise in every framework. The earlier in a project you are, the easier it is to switch out a Vue framework. So if you jump in with both feet to Angular and a week later you regret everything, that's not too bad to explore something else. If you're 6 months or a year into a project, you better know that be more familiar with the ins and outs, I guess, of what the limitations are of what you're working with. For Vue anyway, it was inspired by someone who was working with Angular and wanted to prototype applications faster. So he wanted to get rid of all the baggage of Angular and be able to prototype stuff. So it's really great for standing up an application, but if you don't have the discipline and self-awareness of where this app is going to go, and you build weird patterns from the beginning, then down the road you're going to be struggling. And that's the trade-off of convention versus flexibility.
That's part of that rope that we were talking about.
Exactly.
I have a quick question on Vue, actually. I've been playing with it. I think it's the greatest thing ever. You think it's the greatest thing ever. A lot of people think it's the greatest thing ever. But I want to get into a project, but I'm an enterprise developer, and in a couple days I'm probably going to get shut down because there's no corporate support yet, and the ecosystem isn't as strong as it is with things like React. I know Vue has been around since 2014, but it's just gaining speed. Do you think it'll eventually get to that level, or it'll always be up there, but not in the same league as like a React or an Angular?
Sure. At the moment it's kind of a little bit of an offbeat dark horse. It doesn't have a company behind it, but if you want to be that company, you can be. If you look on the Patreon page for Vue right now, there's only 250 backers, but he's getting about $15,000 a month to back this. There are a few consulting companies that are giving very large amounts of money to make sure that Vue development doesn't stop, because it's very important to them as a framework. If you want to go to Facebook or Google as they're winding down React or Angular 10 years from now and say, wait guys, don't, they're good.
It's going to tell you the source code.
Yeah, it's all on my team. So.
Sure. I don't think I've mentioned, but Polymer is actually was started from Google and continues to be supported by Google, which is why you see like YouTube is now written in Polymer kind of thing. So if we're looking at a company that's going to back it, it seems like they like it.
So long term, where do I see Vue going? I think it takes a lot of good inspiration from the other frameworks and vice versa. There's a lot of learning and convergence going on between everybody. So I don't think it's going to go away, especially given the strong foothold it has internationally, and the fact that it's just so darn pragmatic about letting you get stuff done, especially for smaller applications where you don't want to spend a week worrying about your architecture, you just want to build something because it's on a small website and get it off quickly. I think that's where it really shines, and I think that there isn't another framework that fills that need as well.
If you're trying to convince somebody of it, there might be some mileage in terms of pointing to existing bags of components. I know like Ant Design with React did that a while ago. I don't know if there is a review, but you sometimes see these incredibly comprehensive sets of components just sort of flood the market, and it's like Bootstrap all over again, but it's good. And it can go a long way toward producing this uptake because we can just hit the ground running.
I have a different opinion. I think if you're a software developer, you're the most wanted person in this whole, there's several recruiters in this room trying to hire you. See if this company's hiring, go work you. If that was what makes you happy, you should try to find a company that's doing it. It's very hard to change enterprise companies. It's very difficult. I mean, NM had to acquire LearnVest to make it possible. So
yeah, we can have a whole discussion, and since I'm in enterprise architecture, on the drivers that make us choose software. And most of you in this room will hate me for the things that I would say.
So,
which basically
we need you to find a new job.
More than first rule of software development, quit your job.
If you don't like it, we're software developers. People want to hire us. Talk to any one of these recruiters.
Yeah.
They'll find you a new one tomorrow.
All right, Joel.
So what, for your framework of choice, what would be your recommended path to learning it? Free or paid? Like, what would you point people at to get them excited about building real assets?
Yeah, Angular.io, I mentioned it before, but the documentation there, they have a very, very thorough walkthrough of all the different aspects of it. So you start at ground zero, right? There's everything to build out the app, all the structures, all the different componentries, the hierarchy, it walks you through things to consider, things to avoid, obviously your do's and don'ts. And at the end, it's actually an application. So it walks you through writing your first application.
Yeah, I would say the same for Ember. I would just go to the official documentation. It's very good, very thorough. There's tutorials, there's very good practices, versions. Obviously, if you're starting from scratch, I start with the newest version, but all the documentation is well versioned and very thorough. So I would just go to the official docs.
Their tutorial is actually super cool in that it's the steps to building a real app, and then it has steps to writing tests, how the experts in Ember would write tests, which is, I think, is really unique.
Testing is built in out of the box with Ember. It's a core part of using it, which I haven't brought that up yet, but that's one of the key features there.
And their guides are like, this is how you make it to do that. Here's how I test it. It's super cool.
Angular does that too, by the way.
Cool. Elm has got a great guide on his website. They wrote a book called the Elm Architecture that walks you through everything you need to do with an Elm app. There's a lot of YouTube videos and daily drift videos and that type of stuff if that's what you're into, but the website's pretty good.
Yeah, I think the documentation nowadays is pretty good for everybody. The view is no exception. They're getting started. We'll get you the basics. They'll get you up and running. If you are a person who likes video learning, I highly recommend Jeffrey Way's video series from Laracast. He's been a PHP guy forever doing video training, but his Vue tutorials are free on his website, and I think they're outstanding. And they do a great job of getting you to that next level of, I understand the basic directives and syntax, now how do I build an application, how do I test it, how do I do these things. So that's my recommendation. There's lots of books. The creator of Vue is working on his own book right now, so he's trying to help
For Polymer, there's the Polymer project site that's got right away on the landing page a good example site that started. There's the web components.org site that has a whole collection of all these nice reusable third-party contributing components, and they explain how to use them. From a video series standpoint, I really like Brock Dodson from the Polymer team. He has a lot of really quick, digestible videos that you can look at. They'll teach you, like, here's how you can start using Redux with Polymer.
Yeah, to be honest, I'm pretty tuned out on tutorials because I've been doing it for too long. There's tools like Egghead, and the documentation has gotten a lot better.
So I feel like I should just say like Frontend Masters is pretty good.
Yeah, it helps to work with with an opinionated framework to start with. Dan Abrams spent a ton of time on Create React App. Guillermo Rauch did Site, which has path-based routing, so you can relive your PHP glory days. You can put a file in a folder, and that's the route. Pretty cool. I've actually had a couple friends of mine who didn't want to get into it, because there's nothing easier than putting a file in a folder and having that rendered. But there's a ton of ways you can go.
And we can send in links to send out to everyone afterwards.
Put it in the comments. Everyone who's RSVPs will get emails. What's the thing that I have the emails in, so. We're gonna do one more question, and then we're gonna do the raffle, and then I want, since there's a ton of people in here and a lot of new faces, I want you all to talk to each other, so. Who wants to be the last question? There was a hand going up over there.
Well, mine is more specific to the React stuff in terms of.
More React. Is there any with a chance?
So if somebody else wants to ask the question.
Agnostic question.
I've hardly said anything.
Sure, I have a framework agnostic question. I've worked a little bit with Vue, and they have really cool dev tools integrated that you can do. How about the dev tool integration with other frameworks? How's that going?
So for Angular, they have this project called Augury, and then it's built in so like you hit F12, you get to your dev tools, like in Chrome, for example, and you can actually explore the state of the models themselves, right? The component trees, different things. You can manipulate them and watch the DOM actually update. It's a great tool for developers, right? It's a really good debugging experience. I like it.
For Ember, there's a browser plugin called Ember Inspector that gives you an Ember tab in your DevTools and lets you just go through your entire application. You can see what your route is. You can inspect your models and your controllers and see what the whole state of your application is at any given point. And it gives you a lot of useful feedback. So I would recommend that.
With Elm, there's, I don't want to get into too many specifics, but there's a thing, you have a time traveling debugger. It'll track every event that's happening in your app and the state. So if your user runs a new bug, they can export, send it to the developer, they can import it, and they can see exactly every single thing that's happened in the app since boot to that point when it failed and reproduce the bug, and they can step through back, forward, whatever. You can see the state of every step.
If there's anything to motivate you to build your apps in a functional style, time travel debugging is it. Like you can do it with React, you can do it with Vue. I don't know about Angular.
So there is a state plugin for Angular, but I don't know how popular it is though.
It's probably just amazing.
It's written with observable, so it could be amazing.
But you mentioned the Vue dev tools. They're pretty much a straight rip-off of the React dev tools. So you get all of the inspection, things you can adjust, viewing your component tree, the time travel debugging if you're using Vuex, which is their version of Redux or Onyx. That's pretty solid.
For Polymer, there's a Polymer CLI that'll help. Otherwise, from a browser-based dev tool, there's not really anything that I'm aware of. I wouldn't be surprised if there's something that exists. What I normally do is if you inspect the element, at least within Chrome, there's the $0 that indicates the one that you're selected on. You can access everything. You can access the attributes, functions, use whatever you want, just for the console.
Yeah, React Upstate, React DevTools, and it'll annoyingly tell you about it if you don't have it installed. It's great, actually. You can do a ton of stuff with it. You can see trace renders, all those sorts of things. If you choose to use something that's functionally pure like Redux, you can do time travel debugging. That's kind of a property of the mechanism. The fact that so many React apps encourage a one-way data flow where you fire an event, it goes back to a dispatcher, results in a model change and flows back over, just kind of encourages a more debuggable style of application where if you have a log of all the actions and the payloads that were ever emitted, you can make a lot of hay with that. Even if you don't have total functional purity, you can get pretty far with it. Something we use for debugging in our live production apps is the ability to just pipe the dispatcher directly into Sentry, which is an area aggregator for JavaScript, and it goes a long way toward figuring out what the hell somebody did. Also, profiling support is really useful. Chrome has this user timings API whereby the code can actually emit when it enters and leaves different code blocks. So when you get your flame chart, if you guys are familiar with that, when you're profiling an app, it can actually show as you enter and exit the components individually. So you're not really seeing React internals, you're just seeing your components. That can go a long way toward finding hot render functions and so forth.
That applies to all of us. That's really cool.
Yeah, I think user timing API, I mean,
yeah, it's open.
Yeah.
It's Chrome specific, but anyone can use it. it?
Well, yeah, sorry, what I meant to ask is, are any of the other dev tools platforms using it?
I think Elm is. I think Elm out of the box is pretty aware of performance. Not Elm, Ember, sorry. I think Ember too. They worry about performance a lot because they were so
Yeah.
I know they are.
One thing I forgot to mention real quick is dev tools with Angular, you actually get the map file, so you get TypeScript. So you can step through, rather than the JavaScript output, you can actually step through TypeScript. And that's an amazing debugging experience. Another selling point. Yes?
MVS code integration.
What's that?
MVS code integration, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm gonna pick our panel for